Hello, everybody. So, as I told you yesterday, I had a friend who was in Washington, D.C., and I got to talk to him this morning and get some of the details about what he saw happen. So, he said, first of all, that the stuff at the Capitol was hard to follow because he wasn't in the Capitol building. He was kind of near it while that was happening. But honestly, he said you might have been able to follow that story better because you were getting updates. I was on the ground with thousands of people. But he went down mostly to see what was going on, and because he has concerns about election fraud. He didn't bring a gun. He didn't go to hurt anyone. This guy is he's one of my best friends. Good, solid dude. He doesn't hate Mexicans, like all these stereotypes they try to put on all these people. It's a joke. You got to be an individualist. Every individual is different. You can have schmucks in a great cause and terrible people, great people in a bad cause. Like, it doesn't matter. But anyway, he went down with some friends, and he was telling me that apparently all the people who were headed to D.C. Had their four-way flashers going when they were getting close, just so everyone knew who was going where. And he got north of Gettysburg. He was coming down from Vermont, and it was just a sea of four-way flashers going at a standstill, pretty much, looking forward just for miles and miles and miles. And they got there, and he said by the time Trump was speaking, there were tens of thousands of people there. And he went around and he was just talking to people, trying to find out what their deal was, why they were there. He talked to an older guy who had his granddaughter with him, saying that, he was there because he was worried about the future of the country, and if the elections were not rock solid, what the repercussions of that could be. And he pointed to his granddaughter and said, what country is she going to have if we don't have secure elections? And he saw lots of people from different ethnicities, different walks of life, who were just there seeing what was going on. And he said it had a very positive vibe to it. And this is what I think is really important to notice, is that, I don't know how many people actually stormed the Capitol building, but a tiny, tiny minority compared to how many people were there. And these people did not bring, it wasn't like they were all strapped to the teeth with ammunition and guns. They were there to show that they did not approve of the way things were going. That is exercising your First Amendment right. And because what, a few wackos ended up doing, the entire movement is being cast as seditious traitors, and that's just ridiculous. And what this really reminded me of was going to the Black Lives Matter protest back in June. Everyone that was there with me was peaceful, and no one was hurting the cops. The cops weren't hurting any of the protesters. We marched all the way across town. The cops were stopping traffic for us. The messages were all about unity and peace and fixing the systemic issues. But if you watch the news, all they would focus on is who was throwing a brick through a window, who was burning, something, the cops that were harassing people. It was a very false image of what was happening most of the time. And it sounds like that's what was happening here too. Most of the people were there peacefully, just to show that they did not approve of what was going on, which you can't demonize people for doing that. That's their First Amendment right. So I wanted to talk about some suspicions I have, because the Capitol building is a very secure building, and these idiots who stormed it were pretty much allowed to walk through. There have been a couple videos of the police opening up barriers and even one video of a guy kind of waving them on into the Capitol building. And once they got in there, I mean, you see the pictures, they're kind of just walking around aimlessly. There was very little resistance, and there were a couple people that were shot. But, I mean, if this had been any sort of normal happening, you know, a lot of people would have been shot. Like, this is the Capitol building. And so it made me wonder if this was enabled. It was certainly allowed, but was it even enabled? I think that's possible. You know, this guy who's wearing the buffalo hat, they've seen him at a lot of other protests throughout the country instigating shit. Whether that means he's a plant or he's just some guy who goes around agitating all the time, I don't know. But I think this is basically a setup. That's kind of where I'm coming from at this point. And what it allows the media to do is to portray all of the Trump supporters as evil traitors who have to be put down. Let's see, I got a comment here. I'd like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I'm outraged at the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. Donald J. Trump. Yeah. You know, Trump did not approve of what was going on. But whether or not there were bad actors present, I think there were. The fact is that people are trying to just make a blanket statement about all Trump supporters that they went to Washington to place their monarch in power, and that's just bullshit. That's not what was happening. You know, a lot of these Trump supporters are going through frustrations that progressives are going through, that libertarians are going through, that just Americans in general are going through. And I think they're misguided. You know, I think they put their faith in the wrong place, and some of their hatred is aimed at the wrong things. But the point is, they're pissed because the system is not working for them. And, you know, instead of demonizing all of them and treating them like trash and treating them like traitors because of what, you know, a few dozen idiots ended up doing, we should be reaching out to them and saying, yes, you're right. You know, we do need a government that represents the people, that is accountable to the people. But that's not what's happening. You're seeing a furthering of the divide between the right and the left. And this really hit me because I remember thinking while I was at the protests in June that the guys who had been protesting the lockdowns a month earlier should be joining alongside with the Black Lives Matter protesters, because they're both protesting the same thing. They're protesting an oppressive state. But everything is so effectively turned into a right-left bullshit battle. And that's totally what the media is doing with this. You know, it's these right-wing people are dangerous. You know, Trump has ignited a racist, hardcore right-wing movement that needs to die, and it's just not. I don't buy it. You know, the right and the left need to unite against the state. Until that happens, you know, the establishment is always going to win. So think about it. Think about all the fights they're getting us into, and then think about that bill that I covered a couple weeks ago that ended up getting rammed through. You know, $2.4 trillion, most of it going to foreign countries, the military, and all the fucking, you know, corporations. Those guys do not, you know, they don't care about purity tests. They don't care about minute disagreements. They'll pass these fucking bills together. The authoritarians will. And so the libertarians, small L libertarians, they need to start realizing what's going on and put their bullshit differences aside and unite against these monsters. So the thumbnail I used is Kent State. And at Kent State, you know, the federal government showed zero reservations about murdering students. And I'm supposed to buy that while these Trump supporters were storming the Capitol, that only a couple people got shot, and it was after they'd already gotten inside the building. It doesn't add up to me. It just doesn't. I think this was encouraged and allowed to happen. And, you know, there were people that were arrested and there were police outside, but if you already knew there were going to be tens of thousands of people there and you knew that there could be a flashpoint, you would have the National Guard around the building already. And it sounds like there were intentional wrenches thrown in the cogs to keep that from happening. I don't know. It just all really rings sour to me. And I just think that this is an opportunity for them to demonize all Trump supporters, kind of like Fox News has been demonizing all protesters, you know, throughout the last year. And it's just going to continue the divide and make us hate each other when we're just ignoring the enemy. But it's late. I got to go to bed. I just wanted to let you guys know I am super skeptical of the official story. And whatever the true story is, stop hating your Trump supporting neighbor or your Biden supporting neighbor. They're not the enemy. The state is and always will be the enemy. The other thing I did want to say is I know I was going to point this channel in a new direction after the election ended, but I mean, there's so much that's going on in the government, and I also think that we're approaching a new level of corruption, and we're also getting beyond the brink of being able to turn anything around. So the new direction for my show is actually going to be trying to expose who the enemy is to people, and then also trying to get people to take care of each other and themselves instead of expecting help from the government. So that is what the general message I'll be pushing is going to be going forward. So, as I always say at the end of these, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. No one else is going to do it.